Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, this week in Vienna, some tentative talks have started between the United States and Iran on the United States returning to compliance. Well, in theory, the United States and Iran both returning to compliance with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the JCPOA. The talks are not direct. In other words, the United States delegation and the Iran delegation are not meeting in the same room. It is being mediated by the other members of the JCPOA, as well as the European Union. When we have discussed this before, Peter, we've done this several times since the Biden administration took office, we have expressed some skepticism whether this was going to happen because the record of the Biden administration is that it tends to talk out of both sides of its mouth. Yeah, we're going to leave Afghanistan sooner rather than later, but not just yet. Yeah, we unlike Trump, we're going to have good relations with our NATO allies, but we will maintain our sanctions over Nord Stream 2. And again, look at us. We've renewed the New START treaty with Russia, but boy, are we going to be hostile to Russia? Nothing like we saw under Trump. And again, same with China. We're going to be much more constructively engaged with China, but it turns out that actually we're going to be even more hostile to China than the Trump administration. So the same seems to be applying here, and the issue, the way they've delegated this is there are going to be these two committees. One committee that is going to oversee Iran's return to compliance. Another committee that is going to oversee the United States' return to compliance, which is the issue of sanctions. Now, the problem arises that the United States has rather confused issues because there are the sanctions that the Trump administration imposed when the United States left the JCPOA in 2018. But then after that, there have been wave after wave after wave of sanctions that the Trump administration imposed on Iran. So we're kind of rather in a state of confusion. Which sanctions does the Biden administration intend to remove? The ones that were imposed when the Trump administration left the JCPOA, or the ones that were imposed afterward? Because the Biden administration, like the Trump administration, is very agitated about all those other terrible activities that the Iran is supposedly engaging in, which is its ballistic missiles program, its involvement in the war in Syria, its influence operations in Lebanon and Iraq and the rest of the region. Over Iran, basically, like the Trump administration, the Biden administration does not want Iran to exert any regional influence whatsoever. So it's going to be rather hard to see how the United States will be ready to withdraw its sanctions and therefore change drastically US policy toward Iran. And if it's just a matter of, well, we're going to withdraw the sanctions that the Trump administration imposed immediately after leaving the JCPOA, if that's all they're going to do, then I don't see how Iran thinks that this is in any way worth their returning to the JCPOA, given all the other sanctions that are going to remain in place, the sanctions against Iran's national bank, and very serious trading sanctions. So I think our skepticism is still warranted. Okay, Peter, what's your take?
I just came home from doing a recording of Crosstalk and had one of my favorite guests on, Mohammed Marandi from the University of Tehran. And he made it, and not that he speaks for the government, but I mean, he is very well informed of what the government position is. And he made it very clear on Crosstalk that all sanctions, all, A-L-L, capital letters, all sanctions It's going to be very, the amazing thing is we started, there are two working groups, okay? And you're absolutely right. One for the Iran to be back in compliance. That's called tweaking. It's tweaking some things, okay? That's a few phone calls, okay? And plus they're just saying, and their position is, let the IAEA have it say, we're going to follow whatever they say. Okay, fine. It's very clear, their path. The path for the Biden administration, this is going to be very, very difficult. And it's because in the final months of the Trump administration, they added even more and more sanctions to make it very, very, well, essentially they made it so it'd be very difficult for Biden to get out. Okay, this was all intentional.
Right.
However, the fact that it is just focused on the agreement is a good sign, and they're not going afar. They're saying at this point in time, okay, this is I think tomorrow will be the second and a half day that they've been talking. We may have an idea where they're going. But, the skepticism is completely warranted, because even if there's a lot of goodwill, it's going to be very, very difficult to undo all of these things and how they all interconnect. And Iran's position is very clear: all sanctions.
Well, that's
right. And so when we have the B team over there and the Biden administration, I don't know. These guys don't have enough brain cells to figure this thing out right now. This is a real utter mess, because let's say both sides have a modicum of goodwill. You're going to need a lot more than goodwill to get this thing restarted. And let's face it, the agreement that the United States went into was recognized under international law. It's not that a president or an administration entered a deal. No, they entered into an international covenant, okay? And so a country like Iran, irrespective of how you feel about Iran, Iran's going to say, not only did Trump screw it up, but the United States foreign policy as a state screwed it up. Now it's incumbent upon them to fix their mistake. It's not going to be, look, hang on, because we talked for the entire Trump presidency how Trump was obstructed by his own administration. There are a lot of Iran hawks deep into the permanent establishment, foreign policy establishment. They're not going to do Biden any favors. Okay, they're going to drag this out. They're going to say, but what about this? What about this? And it's just not possible. We can't do. He's going to get the same thing. And will Joe fight? We don't. You and I pretty much in agreement. He won't. I mean, the thing is, I asked my guests the simple question: Is the Biden administration doing this just to undo something Trump did? Is it in that mindset? I mean, if it is, it's juvenile. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's a very good question, because to be honest, as I look upon both parties, Iran and the United States, I don't really see any great advantages to either. I mean, I can see that for Iran, it's very nice for the sanctions to be lifted, but the chances of all sanctions being lifted are virtually nil. I mean, the United States isn't just going to lift all sanctions just like that. I mean, that's just not the way the United States operates. And then Iran also has to ask, which is, how long is Biden going to be in charge? He might well not last until the 2024 election. He'll be replaced by someone else. We don't know whether Harris will also pursue the same policy. And even if Harris does pursue the same policy, there's a reasonable chance, more than reasonable chance, the Republicans will be back in 2024, all of whom are extremely hawkish on Iran. And Trump himself may well be back in 2024. So again, the United States will withdraw from the agreement. So from Iran's point of view, what guarantees does it have that the United States isn't going to do the same thing again? I mean, this really is like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And then if you look at it from the other side, from the Biden administration side, what's in it for him other than, as you say, he's going to say, all right, we've reversed what Trump did, and then we've gone back to what Obama. But what does Biden care about? So yeah, this is an achievement about Obama, but that was a long ago and far away. I mean, he doesn't care about that. So again, what's in it for Biden? Why would he take any political risks for this?
And we have to make it perfectly clear. The Obama administration never completely fulfilled its obligations, okay? It signed the agreement, but it never followed up on all of the elements of it here. And I say that is an element of bad faith. Obama wanted to be, quote unquote, a peacemaker, but his administration wasn't. We all know he got the Nobel Peace Prize for starting wars, I guess. But you're absolutely right. You have to see this is one of the problems that the publics in the West face, because they never get Iran's side of the story. They can't even imagine what Iran's position is, its strategy is, because they're never given straight facts, okay? Just demonization here. And so even if there's a modicum of goodwill, the Iranians will say, but you left once, I mean, and then who's this Harris person? We don't know anything about her. Is she a foreign policy expert? No. Who is she going to rely upon? The permanent foreign policy bureaucracy, which of course they have the Israeli lobbies here, and it's a lot more complicated. That's why I asked my guest, I said, is this just, undo what something that Trump did? I mean, that is just ridiculous if that's the case here. But we're in a real conundrum, because even if Biden, if he had all of his facilities and he could marshal the bureaucracy, it's going to be an uphill struggle. I mean, really uphill. Or maybe this is just a ploy to say, we tried, we did our best.
Well, that's exactly a very, very good point. And Iran has to be very careful that essentially a trap is being set by the United States. In other words, we'll go in, there'll be a negotiation, and then the United States kind of pulls out. And of course, then points the finger at Iran. Oh, it was Iran's fault. Iran was being obdurate. Iran was being unreasonable. Iran's the one who was breaking the agreement. I mean, look at the way the media covers the JCPOA. It's nearly always that, oh, Iran has failed to comply with the JCPOA. Iran is violating the agreement. Iran has a habit of breaking its word. And it's never mentioned. Well, no, there's no evidence that Iran was violating the JCPOA. It was the United States that walked away. So again, an agreement and negotiations like this could well just be a trap to make it seem like, hey, we were very reasonable. It was Iran that was totally unreasonable and refused to come to an agreement.
Yeah, it all gets down to something very, very simple for people that, I mean, in the intricacies of the scientific part of it, it's really deep. And I mean, one of my guests actually kind of educated me today. I was impressed. Okay, but what our viewers need to know is for Iran, it's just about the sanctions. Okay, they don't want to bomb. They're not interested in it. They're a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They have a right to civilian nuclear power, and they do have centrifuges. They can enrich uranium, but when they want, and they've been very, very forceful, that their report card, they will not judge themselves. They will let the IAEA decide if they're in compliance, and they will do what the IAEA says. All right. So it's sanction relief. It's getting into the financial markets again. This is what they want, and if they're not going to get it, they're going to walk. Okay, because we've been to this dance before. Okay,
that's the issue with sanctions relief. Because let's say the sanctions are removed. Let's say this miracle happens. The United States removes all its sanctions. What companies are going to go in and start investing in Iran? I mean, if they think, hey, I mean, what's the likelihood that the sanctions will be reimposed within 2-3 years? So, you have that problem. But then you also have another problem, which is Iran really better off being in this deal with the United States? Because the United States is going to now, even if they go back into compliance with the JCPOA, the United States will absolutely push for pressure Iran into giving up on its ballistic missiles, into giving up its regional role. It will absolutely begin to do that. And if Iran refuses to go along with that and say, hey, that's nothing to do with us, then sanctions will go back in place. I mean, the Trump sanctions will go back in place. I mean, if they don't adhere to that, because United States is very hostile to Iran. I mean, it is this has been going on for 40 years, ever since the overthrow of the Shah. The United States had dreamt of the Ayatollahs leaving and some Shah-like regime returning to Iran. The United States hasn't given up on that. So therefore, the United States will continue to push and push and push on Iran's regional influence. So again, is it worth getting entangled with the United States when there are alternative options for Iran? I mean, Russia and China are helpful in alleviating these sanctions, and the Chinese yuan, it's becoming a kind of the digital yuan is becoming a kind of global reserve currency. So, maybe it's worth, hey, we'll wait a few years and, we won't be so horribly cut off from all trading relations as we were before.
Well, your thinking that's my thinking exactly too. I think you put it out really quite perfectly. Is it worth it's worth the effort for Tehran because they don't really have to change their trajectory very much. Okay, not at all. I mean, it's basically a technical trajectory. You have to shut down this centrifuge. Maybe the sanction being lifted where they could export excess material to Russia, like the original deal that they had. I mean, for Iran, it's quite doable, okay? But what's the last, just recently, what was one of the world's biggest investment deals made? China into Iran. They're covering their bets, they're covering it. And as the Chinese monetary world grows and stabilizes, they can work within that environment quite easily in comparison to the environment where they're completely shut out. Now, of course, Tehran has options, it does have friends, and the thing, I kept stressing with my guests on my program about what about the element of trust? I mean, why should anyone in Tehran trust this administration?
Right.
Because I mean, a lot of people that are in this administration were the Obama administration, okay? And we know now that they just didn't have their heart in it at all.
No. I think it was a clear case of making this agreement so narrow that it was obviously vulnerable to the next man in. Because if you make any kind of a nuclear agreement, just simply that on this so narrowly focused, and you don't seek to make it as part of a more wide-ranging rapprochement, then whoever comes in next says, hey, Iran is a global sponsor of terror. Iran is the most evil country on the face of the earth. Why? We can't possibly be in any kind of an agreement with these people. And that's it. And that's why, Obama's agreement, just flew out of the window. It wasn't based on anything more substantial.
Well, but at the end of the day, I mean, and again, the media gets it completely wrong, is that it's not about, Iran wanting to get a bomb. I mean, Netanyahu's been saying about for 20 years or so, okay? Right. It has nothing to do with that. Really what it has to do is with the periphery issues, is their missile program, their involvement in Lebanon, their involvement with Iraq, their growing relationship with China and Russia, Yemen, the Houthis. That's what it's really all about, okay? It's not, Iran doesn't want a bomb. It's never wanted a bomb. But they keep hearing it on cable TV, and it's complete mythology. Complete mythology. That's what they focus in on because bombs are scary, right? But trying to convince the public, well, Iran doesn't have a right to its own foreign policy. I mean, even the boneheads on cable won't say that because it sounds so utterly ridiculous. Well, exactly. So that's why you focus on mushroom clouds.
That's it. That's a very good point. That's why Obama's policy was so misconceived, because it was so narrow, when the real issue between the United States and Iran was precisely the United States wanted to eliminate Iran as a regional power. And of course, you may look at it and say, hey, that's a ridiculous idea. Of course, Iran is going to be a regional power, given its size, the educated population, given, the differences that exist between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf state. Of course, Iran's going to be a regional player. But the United States isn't going to accept that. So that's why Obama's policy was just so misconceived, and making it so narrow, it was always so vulnerable. I mean, in a way, it's similar to the way the Washington policy establishment gets absolutely obsessed with some arms control agreement with Russia, and not seeing that that's great, arms control agreements, but it has to be a part of a general détente. Without it, it's just boom, it just disappears. Just like the SALT agreements just vanished when relations between the United States and the Soviet Union deteriorated. That's it, boom, they were gone.
Yeah, having said that, I want to make it clear to everybody here. I was for the JCPOA. I was for it. I was very public in supporting Obama's drive because I thought, and I was obviously wrong, I thought it could be an opening to do other things. Okay, I was wrong. All right, and I think now historically we know that there were no good intentions there.
Oh,
Okay?
there really weren't.
So, but at the time, you know, after all these decades of hostility, it was a movement in the right direction. I'm always willing to give that a chance here. So,
right. And again, there's a sort of analogy. I mean, we talk about the United States and Soviet Union. The same thing happened with the North Korea agreements. I mean, like, you remember when Bill Clinton signed that agreement with North Korea? I mean, you know, I wasn't a great fan of the Clinton administration. I thought, oh, okay, this sounds pretty good. This is a reasonable agreement. But it wasn't part of any step-by-step rapprochement, which we would have needed between North Korea and the United States, a normalization of relations. And of course, when that happened, then boom, you know, that also vanished within a few years.
And that opening started at the end of the Bush administration, before the Clinton administration. And Larry Wilkerson, who was the chief of staff to Colin Powell, he has come out subsequently and said, we were never serious, and the North Koreans knew it.
No, okay? Exactly.
This is a pattern. This is a pattern. And people, you know, the way foreign policy is informed to the public is a complete fiction. Okay, the United States, when it's dealing with North Korea, with dealing with Iran, does not have goodwill. Okay, and there's always an angle there, and they know it. Okay, I mean, when John Bolton said, you know, he likes the Libyan model for North Korea. The North Koreans are not dumb. They know what happened in Libya. Okay.
Right.
So there's not real, there's no goodwill. There's no goodwill here. And, you know, you can't step in the same river twice, you know.
Right. But that's exactly right. And that's my feeling as well here, that these negotiations will continue in a fairly pointless way until they'll just vanish. And then the media will go into their overdrive and say, oh, it was all Iran's fault. Iran was obdurate. The Biden administration had extended its hand. There was an agreement that we were almost there. You know, much like, you remember the Camp David agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We were just there, 2 inches away, and then the Palestinians walked. So we were 2 inches away, and Iran walked. You can just see that's how that.
You've already written the media script for us, George, because that's probably what's going to. I mean, let's put it this way: that's the 99.9% possibility here. Right. You and I, because we have, it's our very nature. If it's 0.1%, I'll fight for it. Okay, I'll fight for it. Okay.
All right, Peter. Well, we shall maintain our laser-like focus on the negotiations in Vienna and on everything else. Remember, we are now on Rumble. Please look us up there. And if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.